Welcome. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the Library Society. My name is Laura Pelzer. I'm the executive director. We're really honored to have this crowd and this discussion this evening. A couple of quick housekeeping items in addition to Gabriel, thank you for addressing the seats. If you will all silence your cell phones, that's really important. Just make sure they're turned off. We're going to have a wonderful talk, and then there's going to be time for question and answer. So please have wonderful questions at the ready. And lastly, we are filming this program. We look forward to making it available to those who couldn't be here. There definitely is a wait list. And so we want to get it out there, and we will be publishing it soon. But if you would please refrain from taking any individual photos or video, that would be greatly appreciated. Almost a year and a half ago, Ukrainian President Zelensky first outlined his formula for peace. It set forward an ideal for not only how the war would end, but how all wars should be fought and should end. In short, the points include not only a formula for ceasefire and accountability, but the demand to prevent the weaponization of food and the environment, and procedures to prevent the conflict from reigniting. His chief of staff noted that peace needs co-authors. Tonight, we have that. We have an unbelievably rare opportunity this evening with Jim Hake, the CEO and founder of Spirit of America, the humble group that has been so incredibly influential in bolstering the U.S. support of the efforts in Ukraine and is generously giving more of his time to share with us about what is actually happening in this reality that faces our global community. This evening is only possible thanks to the wonderful network here at the Library Society. Longtime supporters Carrie and Bill Griffin have generously worked to make this appearance possible for the Charleston community, and we are so fortunate. Bill Griffin spent 27 years of active duty in the Marine Corps. He and Carrie have known and supported Jim since he started Spirit of America just over 20 years ago. Please join me in welcoming Bill to properly introduce and welcome our speaker this evening, Jim Hake.
Thank you all for making the effort to come here. It's really appreciated, and obviously you're all interested, and this is timely. First of all, I'd like to thank the Library Society for the Executive Director, Laura Pelzer, her predecessors, Janice Knight, who's in her 45th year of service here, and all of you who made this possible. It's really appreciated. Jim Hake, I believe you've all had an opportunity perhaps to see his biography, but for those who haven't, Jim was born in Philadelphia, was a graduate of Dartmouth, attended Stanford's Graduate School of Business. He formed and sold 2 companies in the early era of the internet, and he became a venture capitalist. And like the rest of us, he remembers where he was at 9/11. Jim describes that experience as transformative. And he said in a TED Talk he gave in 2013, at that moment he felt a very strong belief in what America stands for and what America means to the rest of the world. Carrie and I first met Jim 20 years ago. Dan Henninger, who's been a great believer in Spirit of America and Jim Hake's leadership, wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal in April of 2004. And he described what Jim was trying to do to support Marines in the Anbar province of Iraq. There were 7 Iraqi television stations that weren't functioning, and as a consequence, the Iraqi people were getting propaganda from Al Jazeera. And the Marines asked whether he might be able to help put these things back into operation. In this Wall Street Journal article, they explained that Jim had calculated that to repair all of this equipment, antennas, video equipment, all of this, would take about $100,000. Within a week, they had received from readers $700,000. Within 2 weeks, $1.5 million. So what Jim is going to tell you tonight is the journey that took him from that initial explosion, which stunned both him and the Marines at the generosity of the American people. He had already named this organization the Spirit of America, and you'll understand why. Jim's organization was the first that was authorized by Congress to work directly in concert with deployed Marine, Army, all military forces that were forward and their commanders, and with ambassadors in countries all around the world, which gave him the ability to be nimble and responsive, that to do things that in the short term the government could not do. Jim believed strongly in the spirit of America, and he felt what he needed to do was to harness that. Carrie and I first met him when he was doing this. We had read that article. Carrie, having a keen nose for entrepreneurs who are credible, called Jim, found his number, had several conversations with him. I was in my final tour in California. She said, we must go meet this guy. So we drove to Los Angeles, and Carrie asked, how can we help? Jim said, well, I've got a team of special forces that are asking whether we can come up with some soccer balls for the children in this village. And he had persuaded Jim and others that this kind of effort would win goodwill and trust and make the Americans who were there safer because of that goodwill from the community. Carrie, being the tenacious wife of mine that she is, began cold calling Adidas and Nike and all of these other equipment suppliers. She got not only soccer balls, but footgear, pads, goalposts, nets. Got them to Jim. Jim got them to the military. And it's yet one other story. So we've been following Jim's successes since then. And if you look on their website and see his board of advisors, you'll understand the kind of leadership he's earned and the kind of followership he's earned. So Jim, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bill. Can you set this down? We're live, right? I'm live. Yes? You can hear me. Great. Well, thanks, everybody, for being here. It's an incredible turnout, and it speaks so much about the beautiful city of Charleston that you all are here. I'm honored to be invited to speak with you. The insights that I'm going to provide into Ukraine and what's at stake there come from my work with Spirit of America. As Bill mentioned, I founded the organization 20 years ago. We've been active in Ukraine since 2014, so 10 years now. And just to set the stage, we're a privately funded 501c3 nonprofit. We do not receive, nor would we accept, government funding. So everything that I'm going to be telling you about, what we're doing in Ukraine and reference elsewhere, is being done powered by citizens. And for the last 2 years, we've worked side by side, U.S. military personnel in Europe, to provide non-lethal assistance to help the Ukrainians defend their country, defend their freedom, defend their democracy. Our motivation is to stop the suffering at its source and help Ukraine win. So that makes us pretty unique in the nonprofit world. We're what's sometimes referred to as a not neutral NGO. We're a not neutral nonprofit because we're taking a side, and we're taking the side of the good guys in this. We're taking America's side, we're taking Ukraine's side. And at its core, Spirit of America is a citizen service organization. And the whole idea is to tap into the power of people just like us to support what our nation is trying to accomplish around the world, to get citizens together to show the world America at our best and the best of what we stand for. And I can't tell you how important I think that is. Well, I will tell you how important I think that is as I roll along. But we do this without any political content. the whole idea behind our organization is patriotism without politics, and I think that the world could use a whole lot more of that, but that's my opinion. So we are all about the importance of citizens and citizen activity. So I'm going to take this opportunity to call out a few folks who are here tonight, and I know all that you are here are already engaged as citizens, and that's why you're here. And so what I'm about to say applies to everybody. So Bill and Carrie Griffin, we already heard a little bit about, but Bill served in the Marines. Carrie, for a period, was a military spouse, and the military spouses in our nation's national security are the great unsung heroes of the country's efforts around the world. We have General Jim Linder. I met Jim when he was the commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command for Africa. Jim was a user of Spirit of America, as it were. We did some great things together, with he and his team in Africa to help stop the increase of terrorism in West Africa. We have John Gunderson. John, career Foreign Service officer. He opened the U.S. presence, opened the embassy in Kyiv in Ukraine in 1992. We have Judge Michael Ludig, one of the nation's preeminent legal scholars. We have some of the CHS for Ukraine team here who are doing great work themselves to help Ukraine. And we have the Charleston Library Society itself. And so what these different examples are, and the Library Society seeking to engage and inform citizens, is what makes America a great country. America depends on our citizens to do things that government can't do and government never will do to make the country what it needs to be. So I want to give a round of applause to all the citizens I just mentioned and to all of you. So the first part of the story I've been waiting 55 years to tell, and I'm hoping you're going to give me a minute. So this is my late father. In this photograph, he was 22. He was a Navy Seabee. He was part of the D-Day invasion at Omaha Beach. And he figures very prominently in my connection to Charleston and to my work at Spirit of America. And so this is my second visit to Charleston. And I really hope it's as great as it was the first time, but a little bit less exciting. And I'll tell you what happened. So my dad had his own construction business. He never went to college, but he worked really hard so all the kids could, all five of us. And when I was 11, he and my mom took me and my sister, 14-year-old at that time, on a trip to Charleston. And the other three siblings were in college. His business must have done really well because eating out up until that point in my life was going to Mara's restaurant near Philadelphia and getting spaghetti, meatballs, and pizza. Now, that's still a pretty good dinner. But so when we got to Charleston, we went to a restaurant called Perdita's. And I don't know, okay. Well, it was the fanciest restaurant we'd ever been to. We ordered the fanciest things on that menu, and it was crazy. But the thing I really remember were the desserts. And so every dessert had flames coming off. It had banana. Of course, we ordered the most spectacular things. Nobody could just have ice cream. We had bananas flambe and baked Alaska and all that sort of thing. Looking back on it, I feel like we were kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies showing up in Charleston having, oh, look at this, Ellie Mae. Flames on the bananas. Anyway, when the check came, my dad looked at it, and it was $60. And it was an exorbitant sum. By the way, it's like $538 today, so it's not quite nothing. But and he took out his credit card. The waiter said, "Well, we don't accept credit cards." And back at that point in time, there were no ATM machines. And he didn't have $60 in cash. So anyway, we started joking around, and we're kind of saying, well, maybe we're going to have to wash dishes. And I honestly don't remember how we got out of the restaurant. But I do remember Charleston's a magical place. The beauty of the city, the Spanish moss, I'll never forget it. So this is my first time back since then. And it's especially nice of you to have me here under those circumstances. It may well be that I owe somebody in this room money. I just don't know. So anyway, I think my dear dad would think we Hakes have come a long way, that here I am speaking to the Charleston Library Society. So, about the real subject at hand. As I mentioned, we work alongside U.S. troops and diplomats and provide private assistance in support of their missions. And as Bill mentioned, we have an unprecedented partnership with the U.S. military. No one else does this. And it literally took an act of Congress to make it possible. So I should explain a little bit about how and why this came to be. So as founder of an organization called Spirit of America, you would assume I have some strong feelings about our beloved country. And I do. And I love America. I love what America stands for, and I love the idea of America. The idea of America, to me, is the world's best idea. And so when the attacks of 9/11 occurred, I wanted to do something to help. That idea of America, as Bill mentioned, I was an entrepreneur, and the idea that a group of citizens back in the day could come together and found a country, create a country based on such noble principles, to me, and still to this day, is one of the most inspiring things I can possibly imagine. So when the attacks of 9/11 occurred, and they were attacks on the idea of America, I said, well, I got to do something about this. And I had no idea what would actually be useful. I've been through enough success and failure as an entrepreneur that I realized, well, let's take some time. Pump the brakes here, Jimmy Hake. And I did. So, my father had served in World War II. And he and his generation did their part, so I want to do my part, whatever that might be. But I didn't have any government military background, so it took a while. So anyway, I'm thinking about it, and then one night I see this. It's a National Geographic show about a U.S. Special Forces team in Afghanistan, and the scene that caught my eye was Afghan boys and girls and American Special Forces soldiers playing baseball. I thought, okay, that's just crazy. Everybody thinks soccer is played at anyway, they're playing baseball. And so this fellow here, Sergeant First Class Jay Smith, is telling to the camera the story of how this came to be. And it basically was that he had taken over his baseball glove and baseball to play catch in his free time, and the kids in the village started playing with it. And so Jay calls his wife there's no internet really at the time, not in Afghanistan, and said, hey, honey, can you send over enough bats, balls, and mitts so these kids can play a real game? So she raises the money from family and friends and her church group and so on, buys the gear, sends it over, and voila, there's baseball is being played. And Sergeant Smith was just lit up talking about this. You could see what it meant to him. And that was a light bulb moment for me. I thought, there have to be other men and women serving our country around the world, and they need some help to help the local population as part of what they're doing. That things that they are needed, baseball equipment in this case, that can't be gotten through government channels. And I thought, because they are really our frontline ambassadors around the world. There are so many of them. They're on the front lines, literally. And I thought, well, if there are others that need that sort of help, I'm sure there would be other Americans like me who would be happy to help if only they knew what was needed. And I could use the internet to put the two together, connect demand with supply was the basic idea. So I tracked down, Spirit of America has a long and glorious history of cold calling people. Well, Dan Henninger was one, for example. And so I reached out to the producer of the show, asked him to connect me with Sergeant Smith. He did. Sergeant Smith says, great, come to Fort Bragg on June 1st. We'll talk about it. And I said, great. Where is Fort Bragg? And this is really true. So anyway, we met, and what Sergeant Smith explained was because of the relationship that he and his fellow soldiers built with the villagers and the trust and the assistance, not just baseball equipment, but blankets and shoes and sandals and small-scale humanitarian assistance. Because of the relationship and trust and goodwill he and his team built with the villagers formed a night watch patrol to protect our soldiers from Al-Qaeda that had been crossing the Pakistan border at night and firing rockets on their camp. And when he said that, I thought to myself, I said, oh man, now I really have to do this. And with anyone who's started something, you're excited about an idea, but you're also looking for reasons not to do it because it's just hard work. And no matter really no matter what it is. So anyway, after that I got Spirit America off the ground. The whole idea was getting what our citizens can do in support of what our nation's men and women are trying to accomplish around the world. It began as the most simple, practical idea I had ever had, and it has become the most important, which probably one led to the other. That if it started off this big idea, it never would have happened. So anyway, the practical and nature of it was really a big deal. And the practical part of that was, well, ask questions. Listen to the answers. Understand what's needed and support the initiative of people closest to the problem. So that's a good idea, and well, it is. The first first two officers that I met after starting the organization, Major General Jim Mattis at the 1st Marine Division and his Chief of Staff, Colonel Joe Dunford. Years later, they would go on to be Secretary of Defense and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the same time. And as fortune would have it, those are the first two that I met. And it began a great relationship over the years. We did a ton of things with the Marines over the years. Now, 20 years later, we provided assistance. Spirit America has provided assistance in 106 countries. We've done thousands of different projects, from a few hundred or a few $1,000s up to what we're doing in Ukraine right now. We have raised and put to work $70 million to provide non-lethal assistance to help Ukraine. In addition to General Linder, who's on our advisory board, General Mattis, General Dunford, many other luminaries, leading thinkers and practitioners of national security. So we've pioneered this idea of getting citizens together to help preserve the promise of a free and better life. And so it's through all that, and especially what we're doing in Ukraine now, that I understand that Russia's war on Ukraine is the greatest threat to freedom and democracy since World War II. That's the story, folks. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. When I say we work alongside U.S. troops around the world, this was in Western Ukraine in 2014. U.S. military was training Ukrainian military after the original, let's call it, Russian invasion. The Russian invasion didn't begin on February of 2022, began in 2014. And between 2014 and the beginning of the full-scale invasion, thousands of Ukrainians were killed through Russian aggression, thousands. And there were different peace agreements, not ceasefires. Russia never honored them, and so on. So the key thing we did early on through these soldiers was provide first aid kits and tourniquets to the Ukrainians they were training, because a lot of Ukrainians were dying because they didn't have those simple supplies. And one of the early projects was a really impactful one. We got started in 2014 and 15. We provided the support to start up what was called Army FM, what is called Army FM. And it's a radio station to meet the entertainment and information needs of Ukrainian soldiers, wherever they are, but especially on the front lines. And we had heard about the problem of Russian propaganda, which its first target was Ukrainian soldiers, to get them to give up and go home, and then it would be over. So we found a Ukrainian who had the idea for this and put together the plan. We provided equipment to get the studio operational in Kyiv and transmitters to broadcast the signal in the east. Army FM started operating 2 months after we had the first meeting, and it's been operating ever since, been operating throughout the war. It's one of the top 2 radio stations in Ukraine now. Great part about that is the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, once the idea was proven, picked up the project and provided its funding itself. So we provided that kind of venture capital support. Okay, so with a full-scale invasion. So we've been active in Ukraine, like I said, for 8 years before the February 2022 invasion. And we had a network in Ukraine. We had great relationships with all the U.S. military commands, both special operations and conventional, that were focused on Ukraine, in Europe, Special Operations Command Europe, and others. And let's say give a couple of examples of what we've done early on. These are bulletproof vests. And that was, in the first month, in the spring of 2022, we were supporting full, large-scale mobilization of Ukrainians who were not really prepared for what had happened with the full-scale invasion. So we provided vests like these. Our relationship with the U.S. military has never been more important. So the agreement that we have with the Department of Defense allows the military to collaborate with us, allows the military to talk to us. Hey, Spirit of America, this is what's needed over here to receive and distribute assistance, to provide logistical support, and so on. So these are U.S. soldiers in Poland, March of 2022, and they're unloading a cargo plane which we had brought over from Virginia Beach. We had, because of the relationships we had, especially on the U.S. side, but also Ukrainian side, the gear that we brought over would, was actually driven, but it would fly across the border. And, we had things that left the U.S., and they were in the hands of end users on the front lines in Ukraine, in many cases within 36 hours. So it was super fast and efficient. This is our European Regional Director, Colleen Denny. She's distributing helmets and vests in Ukraine, again, March of 2022. Is Melissa here, by the way? Melissa, so Colleen's sister, Melissa, is here with us tonight. So, which is especially good because we just forgot to tell Colleen we were doing this, and so Melissa found out about it, 45 minutes ago or something. And is Laura here too? Okay, so Colleen's niece is here too, Laura. And Laura, I just say, I hope you grow up to be as courageous as your Aunt Colleen. Okay. So again, spring of 2022, providing these helmets. One of our U.S. military partners had gotten this from one of the Ukrainians that we had provided all this gear to, and it was this picture. This is from a Signal message. Signal is a secure messaging and chat application. This is one of the helmets from Spirit of America from a firefight last night in Mykolaiv, and it saved his life. So we provided this kind of protective gear on the largest scale we could, thousands and thousands of vests and helmets, and we were the world's largest private purchaser of body armor for a few months, and enough to provide this type of gear to the equivalent of every U.S. Navy SEAL, every Army Ranger, and every Marine Special Operator. So it was, our whole thing was, it's got to be big, small and specific, great. Big is what we were going for on scale. Okay, so we stopped doing that kind of protective gear around May, June of 2022 because government supplies of that started to come online. So we don't do anything that government can do. We fill those gaps between what's needed and what government can do. So, in the last, this is really since last spring of 23, we provided $10 million of mobile phones, tablets, and laptops to help the Ukrainians activate a secure communication and information sharing network. And to be able to have that network operational at all levels and echelons and across the Ukrainian military. And it has made them not only secure in their communication, but has made them vastly, vastly more effective in their work. Another example, and this one is really pretty interesting. So this is not Yoda or somebody like that. We provided what's called thermal mitigation gear. And even, it's not standard issue for the U.S. military now for a bunch of reasons. But what Ukraine is, the war in Ukraine is, drones dominate that war in Ukraine. And they're thermal drones, which can see a body heat signature. So if a Ukraine special operations soldier is out somewhere near the front lines, the without here is if that soldier did not have thermal mitigation gear. The with is the same soldier, thermal drone, friendly ones, for testing purposes here, and he's invisible. So what that does, in addition to the other kind of things that I mentioned, does to save lives in Ukraine and help Ukrainians in their fight is just remarkable. And so part of our relationship, we're always making sure we're doing what's most impactful and what government is not doing. That's where we're focused. And so we have a relationship with, it's a US-led command in Wiesbaden, Germany. It's called the Security Assistance Group for Ukraine. And for those of you connected with the military, you're thinking, well, doesn't it have an acronym? Like a friendly one, maybe called SAG-U. Well, yes, it does. So anyway, so SAG-U is a US command where it coordinates all government-provided military aid going into Ukraine, all government military aid, US, NATO partners, and so forth. So that's a great place for us to go because they're sorting out what's needed and what governments are doing. So they're a key partner of ours, and I was there the last time in August of last year, and I was talking to the commander who is responsible for that command. I said, so how many other organizations, NGOs, nonprofits, come here and ask you how they can help? And everybody in the room just starts laughing. We wish. And so that is part of the special role that we can play as a not neutral, non-governmental organization. And the other organizations that do other things, enormously important, no less important than what I'm talking about, but this is our specific area. Okay, so to zoom out a little bit, there are two reasons why you all should really care and do everything you can yourselves and to get our country to support Ukraine. And one is the national security case. And our team is active working with our military and State Department personnel in most of the world's toughest places outside of Ukraine. And everywhere and these are the major areas of focus that we have right now. Everywhere we operate, Russia is making things worse, and significantly worse. And they're on the side, they're against what America stands for and accomplishes anywhere you go in the world. So in Eastern Europe, there's a rise of right-wing, anti-democratic groups. Russia supports these groups and is doing things through misinformation to stir ethnic tensions in the Balkans. They are stirring the pot and undermining support for freedom and democracy in Eastern Europe. In the Middle East, of course, Iran is killing American soldiers in the Middle East. Iran is backing Hamas and Hezbollah. Well, and who supports Iran? Russia. Right? In West Africa, there are coups and taking out democratically elected governments. And who is fomenting unrest and instability in West Africa? Russia is there doing that. And in Taiwan, the Taiwanese are looking really closely at what happens in Ukraine. They know China is looking too, and it's understood that if Russia wins in Ukraine, China is going to fulfill its promise of what they call unification with Taiwan, that China will fulfill its promise by whatever means necessary. So Taiwan's democracy and freedom hinges largely on what happens in Ukraine. And domestically, Russia has misinformation programs that are really intended to undermine Americans' faith in our country and our democracy. That's the main game Russia is playing. And they're really good at it. It doesn't take a lot of money to do it, and it is eroding the country that we love. So every one of these problems, every one of them gets much, much worse if Russia wins in Ukraine. The idea that Ukraine is just about Ukraine, some country, far away, totally, totally wrong. It's why Ukraine is on the front lines of the fight to defend the free world. And history shows that aggressors don't stop until they are stopped. We all wish that weren't true. It's what's going on with Russia, not only in Ukraine, but around the world. So, number two is the national security case. Our security depends on what happens there, not tomorrow, but in the not too distant future. There's also the moral case. And the Russia's war on Ukraine is the clearest case of good and evil that has certainly been in the world in my lifetime. We have torture, rape, kidnapping of children, done as a matter of targeting of civilians, hospitals and schools, as a matter of state policy. Not only a matter of some bad actors, it is a matter of state policy. It's intentional. And so we have, despite our challenges and problems in America, we're on the side of good in the world. Imperfectly, but we're on the side of good. That's where America lands. So we can't look at that and just say, well, all those things I just mentioned, that's okay. I can't do it. So this medic was, before the war started, before February of 2022, he was an emergency room doctor. And he talked, when he talked, it was just so moving. He said, his dreams before this war were just so his daughter could, go to college and have a better life, just the same things that every parent wants. Well, Russia invaded his country, and so he volunteered immediately, joined the military, and in this particular photograph, he's using this photograph on his laptop to make the point to me, Spirit America do not provide ambulances or vehicles that are marked as ambulances. Russia uses them to target us. Imagine, right? The Red Cross is not a sign of neutrality, a sign of hands off. It's a targeting mechanism for the Russians. This is Ruslan Kovacic. Ruslan was the Army FM, the radio station I mentioned, was his brainchild back in the day. Before the Russian invasion of 2014, he was a Kraft food executive, up-and-coming European executive for Kraft food. He dropped everything to join or to advise the Ministry of Defense. He had the idea for Army FM. Here, he's done a lot of things to help Ukraine since. Here he's showing me his house, which was bombed out, not far from Kyiv, right after the invasion. And imagine, so this is where his children have grown up. And so we're inside this. And what he's showing me is, well, right here, before the Russians declared war on us, is where my children played at the kitchen table. And this is a great story. And before I tell it, I'm going to have a drink of water. Excuse me. So in August of last year, I visited a Ukrainian school not far from the border with Russia. And the village had been occupied by the Russian soldiers, and this young lady, Bodana, is about a 15-year-old, she's in the red shirt. And so Bodana and the other students had participated in a program that Spirit of America had created called UActive. And UActive teaches high school students entrepreneurial skills, problem-solving skills, so that they can help their communities, come up with ideas to help their communities. And then they compete for micro grants to make their ideas come to life. And the grants are about $5,000. And so 99% of what we've done in Ukraine is to help Ukraine's military in the ways that I've mentioned. This is the other 1%. The students in this classroom, we were chatting, and so they all got together. They came in. This was during the summer, so they weren't in school, but they all came together, and I just wanted to hear from them. What do you think of this program? And as part of that, they were talking about this boy in the sunflower shirt said, this classroom used to, so the Russians had occupied both the community and the school. And this particular classroom was the one that the kids said were used for interrogations. And so they didn't really talk much about what that meant, but they were really fired up that they had turned that room into this STEM classroom for the whole school. You know, they have colorful drawings on the walls and everything, beautiful, bright, clean room. So the kids also talked about how the Russian snipers, they would see, you know, tracking them when the kids walked across town and that sort of thing. You know, and Bodana and the other kids were really fortunate. They had survived that occupation, and up to this point, they had survived the war. And so all the kids were talking. Bodana was about the last one to speak. She was shy, but when she started talking, she really lit up. And you know, she was saying, you know, this program was so inspirational. And then she went on to talk about it, and I said, well, what was so inspirational? And she said, well, I learned that just an ordinary girl like me could do things to help my country at this time of need. I thought, wow, okay. You know, this program was, you know, we did it to help do that, inspire these young people. I'm thinking, I am the one that's inspired here. It was so moving, the power and commitment that she had to helping her country, you know, as her own citizen service, what was really incredible. And so I have to frame it this way, because now you have a couple of faces with Ukrainian youth. You know, do we as Americans think it is okay to let these young people be tortured or killed or kidnapped? Is that all right? No, of course it's not. We rightly celebrate the greatest generation, and we stand on the shoulders of that generation. And they were great because so many Americans just did their part. You know, like my dad, the vast majority of them didn't have any special honors. They weren't recognized as heroes of any, you know, sort. They just did what was in front of them. They did their part. And by doing their part, they set the world on a new trajectory. A trajectory where, you know, we have experienced since World War II prosperity and security and freedom that's unprecedented in human history. But it's because we won. And you know, in Ukraine, we have the ideal conditions for having freedom and democracy prevail. It will never be better than what it is. Terrible as the situation is in Ukraine, it'll be never better than it is right now. We have the best possible partners in the Ukrainians. Nobody needs to tell them what to do. They are on the case. They are fighting for their lives. They know it, and the initiative of both the military, the citizens, I've never seen anything like it. Best possible partners. We have the clearest case of good versus evil, where if we can't agree that what Russia has done is wrong and should be stopped, this is the time when that is the most clear I've ever seen. We have NATO. It's not just the U.S. We have NATO aligned. You know, other NATO countries, you know, the U.S. in terms of the percent of GDP that we're spending on Ukraine, we're number 29 on that list. So there's pretty good burden sharing. We have partners involved. So if we hand Putin a victory, hand him it, just hand it to him, we're going to live with the consequences for generations. And it'll set a new trajectory for the world. And we're going to be accountable for it if it happens. So I know challenges like this are complex, they seem overwhelming. I am well aware that America has plenty of problems. Plenty. And it's easy to get cynical, it's easy to get discouraged, and use an expression which I first learned in Philadelphia, which I'm not going to use tonight, to just say, So that's easy. And, you know, most people are doing that. Check out, whatever, right? And to me, it's important that we remember that America doesn't stand for perfection. America stands for something even better. And it's the opportunity we have to strive to make things better, to work to live up to our founding ideals, build the America we want to see, because if citizens don't do it, it will not happen. So, none of us can do what needs to be done alone. Government certainly can't do it alone. But if we do our part, united we can. And please do what you can. Thank you. So if you have like 3 minutes for me, I have this George Shultz story, which is going to encourage every one of you. Can I think I'm going to do it anyway. So George Shultz, passed away at about the age of 100, a couple of years ago now, I guess. And he was on our advisory board from about 2010 until he passed away. And I would go see him at his office at Stanford every time I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. And about 11 years ago, as I was my mid-50s at the time, and a backache or a footache or whatever else is going on, you're thinking, gee, I'm getting old. It's kind of in the back of your mind. So anyway, I went in to see George, and I walked into his office, and I said, George, you look great. You look as good as you did the last time I saw you and the time before that. How do you do it? And George got up behind his desk and he said, look at a young man like you. You have your whole life ahead of you. I said, wow, I think that's the best thing I've ever heard. So my point of that is, the game's not over for all of us here. Whatever age we are. Some have further to go and whatever. But there's so much we can do with who we are and our whole lives ahead of us. I encourage you. So that's the main thing. But I have to tell you the second funny part of the story. So maybe like 3 years ago, so whatever that was, like 8 years after the original incident, George had me speak to he has this national security group at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. And it's folks like Jim Mattis and H.R. McMaster and, quite a collection of folks. And so he asked me to talk to him about Spirit of America. Most of them already knew, but anyhow. So at the end of it, I said, okay, I've got to tell this story to everybody. It's just so good. So I told the story I just told. And so George is like, let's say 98 years old at this point, still working at Stanford every day. So I tell that story, whole life ahead of you. You're looking great. And George says, oh, I thought you were going to tell a different story. And everybody's like, he goes, and so he goes, well, what is it? And George says, there are 3 stages of life. There's youth, there's middle age, and there's you're looking great. So that ends things on a little bit of a lighter note, but I couldn't help it. But please think about contacting your representatives and letting them know what you think, and you should let them know you actually vote in this state and all those good things too, because it really does matter. And back to your point, ma'am, I forget your name, but big things happen with small steps. In fact, it's the only way they actually do happen. When big things start with big steps, they almost always fail. And the expression, I think, is, well, how do you move a mountain? And it's one stone at a time. It's each of us taking those steps and doing what we can and doing our part. So, again, thank you for having me tonight.